QSO Today, episode 189, Glen Popiel KW5GP. This episode of QSO Today is sponsored by Soda Beams, makers of great accessories for operating in the great outdoors, and by QRP Labs, makers of fine QRP electronic radio kits. Please support the QSO Today podcast by supporting these fine sponsors. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guth, 4Z1UG, your host. Glen Popiel KW5GP was my guest in episode 49 of the QSO Today podcast, almost 3 years ago. A lot has transpired in that time, and since Glen's episode is the most popular to date, I asked Glen to come back and update us on what he's doing with Arduino projects for ham radio and other great projects for the ham radio homebrewer. KW5GP, this is Eric, 4Z1UG. Are you there, Glen?
Yeah, sure am. Finally back together again after about almost 3 years.
That's it. In fact, I'm going to welcome you back officially. You were my guest in episode 49, and this is now episode 189, and you were with me back in July of 2015. So I must tell the listeners that to date, episode 49 is still the most downloaded episode, and it's great to have you back and have this chance to catch up. I recommend that to the listeners, especially if you haven't heard episode 49, that you pause this episode and play 49 first, and then come back to this episode. Glen, the last time we spoke, you were working on a second Arduino book. How is it different from the first book, and what's happening with Arduino computers for ham radio operators now?
Well, the second book was kind of unique because the first one was so popular. Surprised everybody. For the second one, I decided I wanted to challenge myself as much as the readers. So I came up with the most creative projects. I don't want to call them complex, but they were kind of over the top, challenging but functional products. And they were a lot of fun.
What was the most challenging or most interesting project in that book?
Well, there were several. My number one, of course, was the JT65 transceiver using a little Pixie CW board. And, stop and think about that for a second. JT65 is 65 tones. CW is one tone, on or off. And so basically, we were able to modulate a CW rig.
Well, that's pretty cool. And did you offer or did you add the synthesizer to it to make it a synthesized radio?
Yeah, we use the little DDS module that everybody's using these days. And there's also a CW transceiver in that same book using the Pixie board and the DDS chips.
Now, do you see with a project like this that you could actually do other, like FT8 or other modes with this transceiver? Yes.
Basically, we chose, and when I say we, this was kind of a team effort with what we call our QRP Skunkworks group. And basically, we chose the hardest mode at the time because we figured if we could make that work, you could make anything work. And since then, of course, FT8 has come along, and since all of the work for JT65 is done on the PC side and it just sends control codes to the DDS to shift the transmit frequency, it could be done for FT8, but you'd need somebody to do the PC side of the code.
So does the Skunkworks have that kind of project in the works?
No, unfortunately, we had Joe Large, W6CQZ, as part of that team, and he wrote the JT65HF, and he wrote a custom version for the Ten-Tech Rebel that we originally put this on, and then I adapted the firmware on the Arduino to work with the Pixie. But as far as the PC side, the PC thinks it's talking to a Ten-Tech Rebel.
And what other projects in that book? I'm assuming that there's a range of projects that if you built each one, they'd all be complementary.
Yeah. I started out with, again, a wide range of projects, just kind of strange and unique things and usable things. One of the big things in the first book, I'd focused more on the CDE rotators, and this book I did some of the Yaesu rotators. We did a rebuild and a modification. And then back to the simple things. Basically, the way the book is organized, I start simple and we build towards more complex. So it's almost like an instructional textbook at the same time it's a book of projects.
Do you think that that readers of your books or people that are interested in Arduino projects for ham radio operators, do you think they should start with the first book, or do you think it matters?
Well, that was a decision that my editor and I made early on, that we would include a lot of the material from the first book for several reasons. One, I didn't want to play the game and force somebody to buy my first book just to understand the second. And two is just some relevant material that we wanted the book to stand alone by itself. And if you wanted to, then you could go back and buy the first book and you wouldn't miss a beat in the way.
I'm beginning to have a professional project where we're looking at Arduinos for these projects. And I'm seeing project boards on eBay mostly, and in other places, for sourcing electronic devices out of China that appear to be Arduino-based boards. Do you have any experience with these devices? And what kind of advances have you seen since the last time we spoke in Arduino architecture and in terms of the product offering?
Yeah, I get 99% of my parts from eBay these days, including the Arduinos from China. And the interesting thing about the Arduino, looking back, it's 100% open source on both the hardware and everything else. So anybody can create their own Arduino board. And I've had no problems using the Chinese Arduino boards. They're inexpensive. They work just fine. It's roughly the same components. So I've had absolutely no issue with those.
Do you see some feature sets now in these boards? I mean, it's kind of like, does Moore's law apply to Arduino products? So in 3 years, it seems to me that the Arduino should have changed an order of magnitude.
Oh, yes, absolutely. There are some new CPU boards coming out. The one that sticks in my mind at the moment is the Teensy 3.6 series, and those are 180 megahertz Arduinos compared to the 16 megahertz. And they also have a much more memory and, probably about 4 times the I/O pins. It's got like 56 I/O pins on it, so there's very little you can't do with that.
Do you think that the Arduino could compete with the Raspberry Pi for projects? I mean, the Raspberry Pi seems to be has more media features than the Arduinos do, but do you think the Arduino is getting there?
No, not really. The two are kind of opposite but complementary. As you said, the Raspberry Pi is more of a very small Linux computer on a board, so anything that'll run on Linux can be made to run on it, whereas the Arduino is focused strictly on controlling and sensing things. Now you can combine the two and get some serious horsepower and build your own SDR and stuff like that, but they're really two separate worlds.
I see. So building a project that has say multiple Arduinos in it, or even a Raspberry Pi and some Arduinos, is actually not unusual. What do you think?
No, not really. I can see, building a complete standalone satellite tracking system, with a Linux Raspberry Pi driving the Arduino to actually control the rotors. And that would just be a simple basic.
Right. Is that idea in your book?
No, I didn't go. I haven't played with the Raspberry Pi at all. I've got one here in a box, and it's been in the box since the day I got it.
I see. So your first love are the Arduinos.
Yeah. I mean, it's so much fun, and there's so many things, thinking back to when we were younger and we had to do it with discrete chips and stuff. Think of all the little control things you wanted in your shack and hanging around and things of that nature, like the lightning detector. We used that at field day when we had it storming all weekend, and it was a great help. Back in the day, we wouldn't have had anything like that. So, I'm having so much fun just building the small control type things right now.
And if we're looking at a price range, the smallest Arduinos start for just a few bucks?
Yeah, right around almost a little under $3 right now.
Is there an Arduino project kit or something like that a first-time Arduino user should buy that has all the pieces he needs to, he or she needs to be successful in putting together a first Arduino project?
Well, yeah. Again, eBay, with the demise of Radio Shack, eBay has been the sole source for parts these days. There are a number of basic Arduino kits, but there are none that are ham radio related. They're just basic, learn the Arduino, how to control LEDs and motors and things of that nature. They're not ham radio oriented. And that's something that probably should be looked into.
Well, let's look into it right now then, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If we were going to build a basic Arduino laboratory for the ham radio operator, what would that include?
The first thing, aside from a basic Arduino, would be some LEDs, motors, transistors. When I say motors, I'm thinking things like stepper motors. Oh gosh, put me on the spot here. I've got a wall full of like 600 parts.
So, well, that was a basic kit, So it could include as you're saying. You might want to know how to do some motor control for that rotator project, for example.
Exactly. Another thing would be the rotary encoders that you would use as a tuning dial for a small rig. Let's see. Gosh, there's just so many.
Synthesizer. What is that? That's the
Yeah, it's a DDS module, and most of them are built around the 809850, and those are like $10 or $11 on eBay.
So a DDS module would be something. What kind of power supply would you use for your first Arduino bench?
For basic testing, it can be powered off of the USB port on your PC that you'll need to upload the code. Outside of that, just a standard 12-volt supply, because most of the boards have their own regulator on the board. So you don't need a whole lot in that department. I have a breadboard set up that allows me to quickly prototype a project before I stick it into a box and make it smaller. So that would be something to look into. Another thing, of course, would be your display options. You have that basic 16 character by 2-line LCD, but more recently I've started using the color TFT modules. They're like $3 each, and you can get them in 2 and 3 inch sizes.
If you have something like a Pixie, for example, then you can use all these parts to start to create the ultimate Pixie. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I had one with me at Dayton last year. It was a little Pixie board that was stuck. I call them the mini cube. It was stuck inside of a golf ball display case that I'd gotten from Hobby Lobby, one of those clear trophy cases, and stuck the Pixie with the Arduino and a color TFT display in it and the whole 9 yards. Well, let me put it this way. It's been 3 years. It's been a generational change.
In terms of programming languages, is it easier now to program Arduinos? Can you actually buy or actually interact with either online software or something that you download that actually makes learning and programming the Arduino easier, or is it just piece of cake anyway?
Well, it was designed to be easy. If the look back at the history of the Arduino, it was originally developed for artists and musicians and creative people, not technical people. And so the language is very close to English as you can get, even though it's got C++ in the background. But what they have done is the Arduino is programmed through the integrated development environment that runs on a PC, a Mac, or a Linux workstation. And that really hasn't changed. They've added some new commands as the newer Arduinos have come on board, but it's still basically the same interface. What they have done is they've really turned it into a cross-platform environment. And I say this in the way that the Arduino has so many variations on the hardware now. For example, Adafruit has what they call their Feather line, and within that line they have 400 and 900 megahertz transceivers built in to use the ISM bands, and I actually have several projects of that in the second book. And so you're talking something that's got a 20-mile range.
Well, that's pretty cool. Can you change the frequencies? I mean, obviously the ISM band in 400 megahertz, or the ISM channel or channels is like in 432 megahertz range, right?
Yeah.
So it sits in the ham band. Can you move the transmitter frequencies around?
Oh, absolutely. It's completely programmable.
So if you wanted to build it seems to me like a DMR hotspot, for example, was that possible with the Arduino?
It is possible, but not with these particular boards. These are strictly data type boards, so they'd be sending packets and things of that nature, not DMR.
I see.
But there are some additional boards that have come online, particularly the Ham Shield, and it's called the RSUV3, and I can't remember who made it right now, Hobby PCB. And those are actually 2 meter, 220, and 440 FM transceiver boards that actually stack on top of the Arduino.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Well, I think I've seen some DMR hotspots that use a combination of the Raspberry Pi and the Arduino for something.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those. Most of those boards use like an SDR dongle, and that plugs into the USB port on the Pi, and they may use the Arduino to control the transmitter or something of that nature.
In our last interview, you were working on an upcoming book on mesh networking. How did that go off, and what's happening in mesh networking now that you're following in the book?
Well, actually, it's not so much mesh networking as microwave networking, because that area of technology is moving so fast that there's several technologies out there. And mesh, of course, is a large part of it, but you also have another technology called HamWAN, which is a much higher bandwidth design. And the two are, again, complementary. They don't interact with each other, but they each serve a better role in certain areas. And the book itself really turned out to be, again, much more popular than we expected it to be. And matter of fact, when I'm going to Dayton here, of course, in 4 or 5 weeks, and we're actually going to be discussing doing an update to that book because the technology has changed so much.
Well, it's my understanding that there was the Hamnet guys in Texas who, in the Austin area, who largely kind of pioneered the mesh networking using the Linksys routers. But it's my understanding there's a new group or another group called Arden. Do you know anything about these guys?
Yes, it's AREDN, pronounced Arden, and they are actually a spinoff from the developers group for the original broadband Hamnet group in Texas.
And what are they doing differently?
Well, they're using the Ubiquity boards now, or transmitters or transceiver boards, instead of the Linksys. The Linksys are very old, outdated, and just don't have the memory for all of the functionality they wanted to put into it. So it's the next level from the original broadband Hamnet, basically the same group of developers, and they've moved forward with it, and they've come up with what basically has now become the standard for mesh networking. They've got both a short and a long haul solution, very similar to the packet radio days of old, where you could relay through your neighbor, or you could go directly to a high point and get relayed all over.
And how prolific are these networks now, say in North America?
Actually, very much so, predominantly in your metro areas or in your areas with high points such as mountains, etc., with valleys in between, because you can get a lot of coverage from a few nodes. And it's becoming very popular. And then in terms of disaster scenarios, it would allow you to quickly put up a IP protocol-based solution in a disaster area that you could do data and video and all that kind of transmission over the mesh network.
Are you running a mesh network node at your house or at your QTH?
No, not right now. I have been in the process of I call it my once every 25-year house remodeling, rebuilding, and my shack had been torn down for almost a year, and I'm just now getting it back together.
What kind of upgrades did you make to your shack in order to organize your equipment and make it all nice and neat?
What I did in my shack, and I'll have to get a picture and send it to you, I built a wall-mounted rack unit using those track rails. And now on those track rails, I have 3 HF transceivers, all the tuners and watt meters and my pan adapter and my rotor controllers and my 2-meter rigs and everything else all fits on there, and it doesn't look crowded or cluttered. And actually everything is 100% wired in now. It's all computer controlled. And of course the lab side, I completely redid it as well.
And now this message from SodaBeams. In episode 188 with Richard Newstead, G3CWI, owner of SodaBeams, we discussed the uses of the Whisper Lite test system that leverages the WhisperNet network to verify the performance of your antennas and antenna systems. The WhisperNet network allows you to see where your signal is received around the world. That includes a signal strength report. When used with the Whisper Lite, this analysis can be radically refined to give you true performance results. The Whisper Lite is not expensive and will give you a whole new fun and intensive look at antenna building, orientation on your QTH, and which corners of the world your signal is heard. Think of SodaBeams the next time you want to take your ham radio to the Soda mountaintop or across the street to the park. With hundreds of items, all meticulously selected and built, you won't go wrong. Keep in mind that SodaBeams offers a 10% discount at checkout on all items purchased from SodaBeams if you use QSO Today, one word, QSO Today at checkout. SodaBeams, amateur radio for the great outdoors. And now back to our QSO Today. We were speaking offline about the use of like the Google Apps Suite in education. And since you work in education, do you use the Google Apps Suite?
Well, to be honest, the Google Apps Suite, which is also free for education, so a huge benefit to us, it's got everything you want and need. As a matter of fact, my last book, Mark Wilson, K1RO, up in New Hampshire, he's my editor, and everything we did was via Google Drive.
Isn't that amazing? And you can collaborate in real time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we never had to Skype or call, but we could have. Mark and I are on such the same page, along with Steve Ford. We all have the similar vision that when he edits my book, it's pretty much, you get it to me, I will fix the grammar, and I dare you to find the places where I touched your wording, because he's such a light brush stroke on the changes. He likes to just let it flow as they get it, and it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I go to some of these writers' conventions. We had a science fiction convention last weekend that I went to, and they had the writer panels, and they're always talking about editors this and editors that, and I'm like, I must be blessed because my editor is fun to work with. So I mean, it's this last book. Yes, these books are a pain. I mean, we're talking 500 pages of work and several hundred photos, but it's not. Wake up in the morning and it's like, oh, crud, I got to work on a book. It's, what am I going to play with today? Mark and Steve both really love what I'm doing. And if you've read any of my material, it's kind of like the way I am on these interviews. And it's not anything I do deliberately. It's just me. I'm not into the ham radio formulaic, dry, mathematical Smith chart stuff. I'm into, let's hook it up. If it makes smoke, it makes smoke. That's part of it. And my number one statement, you don't remember your successes. You never forget your failures. And if you learn from your failures, then you have the successes. And that's, the way I've learned to approach things. And, in my second book, I even talk about how I blew the final off a Pixie board when I keyed it down for JT65. After about 35 seconds, it said, I've had enough.
So what did you do? You took the power down?
Yeah, I just I put a little pot on the drive, and instead of driving it the full 1.5 or 3 watts, I now drive it at about half a watt. Okay, so I sacrificed what, 3 dB? JT65, who cares? And that's the thing I want to play with. This is why I like JT65 and FT8 is everybody's on an equal footing. 10 watts on FT8 is high power.
That's right.
And, I've never been a linear person. I've never owned one. I don't think I've ever operated more than 100 watts. And it's just a matter of preference. My attitude is I can fix it with coax and antenna. I've got 9 runs of LMR 400 even for HF on the roof. Why? Well, yes, it's expensive, but look at the loss that I'm avoiding. That's easily 3 dB on a 100-foot run. Well, look, I've just doubled my power by running better coax.
You mentioned in a message that you sent to me that you're about to do a review of the BitX, and that's Asher Farhan's, I guess it began as a 40-meter single sideband transceiver kit. What are you doing with the BitX, and what can we look forward to in your discussion about it?
Well, actually, it's older than that. It was like in the early 2000s, they came out with the BitX design, and it was originally designed for the hams over in India to have a low-priced solution to get on sideband. And it started out, I think, with the BitX 20 for 20 meters. And then several years ago, Ashar Farhan produced it with the BitX 40, and he added an Arduino to it with the DDS module to make it a full-featured 40-meter sideband and CW transceiver. They rolled the CW functionality into it. And here recently, he's come out with what they call the Micro BitX, which is an 80 through 10-meter version. So it's a little 5-watt QRP sideband transceiver that can also do CW, but it's got the Arduino, so lots of folks are building on the code base and adding CW and all kinds of features to it.
Well, I just want to mention again that Asher Farhan VU2 ESC was my guest in episode 87 of the QSO Today podcast, so check that one out. Now, in your review, what have you done with the BitX, and have you interfaced the Arduino to it in a way that perhaps makes it a different animal?
Well, not yet. I got the BitX 40 to review and had to put it together. It comes basically as what I would call a semi-kit. The board is fully assembled, but then you have all the external parts such as your tuning knob and volume and all of that you have to add to it. And then I got a case, and cases are few and far between right now for the BitX. A lot of folks are getting into it. Right now, I got mine from a amateur radio kits over in India, and it was designed for the BitX, and now they've got them for the Micro BitX as well. So I hadn't done a whole lot other than play with the stock BitX for the review, because not everybody's going to get one and know how to code it. So we worked with the stock code. Now, as moving forward, as it ships, the BitX comes with the standard 16-character 2-line LCD, and I would rather have a color TFT and add in features such as signal strength and power output, and just all the bells and whistles that you can put on a 3-inch color TFT display.
Now, it's also my understanding that the tuning control for the BitX is a pot, not a rotary encoder. So would that be a change that you would make to the BitX as going forward if you're going to control the thing with an Arduino to actually put a rotary encoder on it for tuning?
Yes. The reason for that, a pot, to cover the whole slice of the band, you would definitely, when it gets down to one extreme or the other, it goes into, I forget the name of the mode, but it actually steps in 100 kilohertz increments. Or was it 50 kilohertz? Right, because the
pot isn't really linear all the way from one end to the other.
Right, and when you go to either extremes, it kicks in a secondary mode that moves you in larger steps to change the range. And with a rotary encoder, you would have a smooth stepping all the way across. And like you said, with the pot, it's just so sensitive to cover 50 kilohertz across a pot range, with what, 3/4 of a turn. And a rotary encoder would give you much better tuning capability.
It's a pretty cool project. And when people, complain about the cost of amateur radio gear, and obviously, amateur radio gear can cost $10 to $10,000 and more. The BitX is actually a pretty good deal. I think it's still under, $60 delivered to your door?
Yeah, something on that. I think it's like $49 or $59, and then he's got the shipping on it. But yeah, and as it comes, the BitX 40 is a 40-meter sideband transceiver. Just hook it up and go. And you got a little 5-watt QRP sideband transceiver, and there's not a whole lot of sideband transceivers for QRP out there. There's all sorts of the CW ones with the Pixies and whatnot, but very few sideband. And these could also be used for JT65 and FT8 and PSK31.
So, do you see yourself maybe at some point, putting either on your blog or someplace? Either the code or at least following the modifications that you're going to make to the BitX as you go along?
Oh, absolutely. That's the cool thing is, everybody's using everybody else's code. So once I get the TFT and everything going, I'll throw that out there and people can pick and choose and put it in their code as well.
When we spoke a few years ago, you mentioned that your first novice transceiver was the Heathkit HW16. And you sent a message to me that you mentioned that you actually found one and got one, I guess, on eBay. What are you doing with the HW16, or what are your plans?
Well, it was kind of interesting. A few weeks ago, you had one of my childhood buddies that got me into ham radio Mitch Gill, NA7US. And he's now the editor of QRP Quarterly, and we hadn't talked in like 40 years. And it was his HW16 that I was given or sold to as my novice rig. So naturally, you always have that affinity for your first rig.
Yes.
And I have been hunting for one for years, but if you've been going through the Hamfest flea markets, Heathkit gear is at a premium these days. You don't find them at a price that you generally can afford. And I got really lucky at the Memphis Free Fest last year, which is just a little one-day ham fest they have here. I found a Heathkit HW16 that was literally, it was in plastic wrap. It had been extremely well cared for. And what I want to do is replace it with an Arduino for the tuning and everything else. And get my novice rig back, but bring it up into the new millennium with all the cool Arduino things you can do with it.
So you'd put a digital display in it?
Yeah, where the tuning dial is, I would actually remove that and put in some form of a color graphic display in there.
Oh, that's very cool. And of course, this is a tube rig, so that would also be very interesting. You don't see yourself using a stepper motor to turn that plastic dial?
Oh, now that would be interesting.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Use the rotary encoder and to turn, for the tuning, but actually tune the dial with a stepper motor.
Well, I wouldn't need to turn the dial. I would just directly control the.
You're actually right. That's right. You're controlling the dial directly.
But theoretically, I could use the Arduino and interface it to something like Ham Radio Deluxe and get transceiver control.
Yeah, that would be very cool. Yeah, that was but now it's my understanding that you also got some accessories. What accessories did you get with it?
Well, I found a HG10B VFO on eBay, and so I've got the full set for the HW16, and again, that can be Arduinoized, and I'd have a what is it, an 80 through 10 or 2 meter actually VFO, and that could drive a tube rig, for example. And then I also at the Huntsville Hamfest last fall, I came across an HW8. That's their little QRP transceiver, and of course, it's going to need an Arduino too.
You don't think that you're kind of violating the ancient code of modifications to the old rigs?
That's actually a quandary. It's one of those. They're such classic rigs, and beautiful as they are, you almost have to think twice. Which is why I say it will have to be a very delicate and tasteful mod to it. It's not going to be something to cut just to do. It's going to have to be in keeping with the style of the radio itself.
There's a guy in the neighborhood here, I saw it last night, who's got a 1964 Thunderbird. And I'm thinking modifying the HW8 with the Arduino is kind of like putting an electronic dash in a 64 Thunderbird.
Yeah, but then let's look at what they did with the DeLorean and Back to the Future.
Yeah, there you go. That's certainly right.
But yeah, I mean, it is actually something that I have thought about. There will be a lot of purists, and I'm pretty much among that group that'll say, "Oh my God, you just destroyed a beautiful rig." But at the same time, it's like, well, no, let's see what these rigs would look like if Heathkit was around today.
What are your plans for the Dayton Hamvention this year?
Oh my gosh. Last year, ARRL set me up with the Meet the Author booth, and we signed books Friday and Saturday. In fact, they sold out of every one of my books that they brought. And I think they brought 200 copies of my second Arduino book. And, of course, got that going. And then, hopefully this year the flea market won't be the mud fest that it was last year. And so I'll get to prowl around out there. I've got everything that I'm thinking about playing with. But, when you get out in that flea market, you always find something new that you absolutely have to have.
Well, I was there last year, and I got out to the flea market, and I was kind of actually looking for duplexers for some UHF projects that I had, and I found 3 duplexers in one spot. The price was absolutely amazing, but I think I spent probably 4 times that amount finding luggage to be able to pack that stuff in, and then paying the over bag charge for returning it back to Israel. So, yes, the flea market is a dangerous place to go.
Oh, yes. Especially when I get up in the morning and start that wouldn't it be cool if mentality. But I do have to tell you a little story about Dayton and us last year. Now, we drive up from Memphis in a Ford Explorer SUV, and it's generally empty other than our luggage going up because we know it's not coming back empty. But if you were there last year, you saw all the traffic issues on Friday.
Right.
So Saturday morning, we were using the bus from one of the high schools, and we stayed at a little bed and breakfast in Xenia that was just absolutely wonderful, and we're staying there again this year. But we found the back streets to get to that high school. So here we are Saturday morning on the back streets of Xenia. I mean, it is just dead calm and quiet, not a soul on the street. And, you're tooling through downtown Xenia to get to the high school, and we almost got mugged by a bunch of ducks. As we were going down this side street, we were going to have to make a left turn. There were 3 ducks straight in front of us, right at the turn. And you look to make the turn, and there are 2 ducks blocking that turn. And then you look in the rearview mirror, and there is a duck walking around to the back of the truck. And fortunately, my Hamfest companion, Terry, AC5YL, jumped out of the car and scared him off. But I wished I had had a dash cam because it really looked like a planned mugging by the ducks.
Yeah, I remember that the traffic was so bad that we actually had to bail off the bus about half a mile from the fairground and walk in the back way. So we actually end up coming in some back gate behind the stockyard. Well,
I have to say that the bus, the park and ride facilities they had were outstanding. Even on Friday with the traffic, the hardest part, of course, was getting to the high school for the buses. But Saturday, it was just, in and out. Took us like 5 minutes from the bed and breakfast to the high school and another 5 minutes for the bus ride. And they dropped us off at the bus drop-off point. They had like 3 buses waiting. You were never sitting in that bus more than 5 minutes. And they dropped us off at the bus area, and then they had the little hayride tractors that would haul you directly and just drop you off right at the front door. I mean, it was literally 15 minutes from the hotel directly into the Hamfest for us.
So what are you looking for in the flea market?
Well, this year, not so much. I've been, as I mentioned, that my house had been a state of total rebuild. I had what I call my lab and my shack totally torn down. And it's just been put back together, and I'm starting up on some projects. And unfortunately, I needed stuff like yesterday. So I've had to order stuff. So I've kind of got most of what I need for now. It's pretty much going to be, once I hit the flea market, I'll have a small list of things I want. And then as you walk down, you're going to see something and say, I wonder what I can do with that. And by the end of the day, I'll have a full handful of stuff.
Yeah, the great thing about traveling internationally is that you have to temper, what you can actually bring back, unless you can afford to bring a 20-foot container.
Yeah, and the rule of thumb that we have is kind of as a joke, is it has to fit in our backpacks or it can't go home with us.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So if it's something larger, that's going to take some serious effort. But again, we bring an empty SUV up because we know that we just can't buy one thing.
Yeah, I get that. Let's take a short break to hear from QRP Labs. I got a message this week that Hans is filling over 4,000 orders of the QCX transceiver. With that many QCX transceivers, the expertise around this fine QRP Labs kit is accelerating at a rapid pace. This means that your investment today in this kit will pay off in the long run from the upgrades and modifications that will come along. You can get your QCX transceiver now for under $50 US, join in on the fun, and be ready for springtime operation. Be sure to join the QRP Labs email list to keep up to date with the upgrades, improvements, and accessories that will be developed to make this amazing kit even better. So if you're looking for a fantastic way to spend a few nights building, then lots of nights operating, click on the QRP Labs logo on this episode's show notes page to tell QRP Labs that you heard it here on QSO Today. QRP Labs is my favorite kit company. It should be yours too. And now back to our QSO Today. I remember Godzilla and Rodan from the 1960s Japanese science fiction movies, but you mentioned them again recently. Who and what are they?
Oh, dear gosh. Well, when we last talked, I had, I've been showing Maine Coons for a number of years and kind of got out of it.
You're going to have to define that again for the listeners. A Maine Coon is not a raccoon, right?
No, it is a purebred cat, native to North America. It's actually North America's only native purebred breed. Everybody else is an import. And they are roughly 3/4 size bobcats with a big, long squirrel tail and a nice, long coat that really doesn't tangle. You don't have to comb them out or do a whole lot. And they have the temperament of a marshmallow. They are as gentle as can be, but they are also smart as you could possibly imagine. And it's like having a pair of 3-year-old kids running around your house looking for trouble to get into. And that's a Maine Coon. And I've been showing them on and off for a number of years. I got out of it about 25 years ago. And just before we did the show last time, we lost our 17-year-old. And naturally, of course, the house was too empty, so I had to get some more. And I had just picked up a pair of littermate kittens. And I made a serious mistake in getting two. One is manageable. Again, you're trying to deal with a pair of wild 3-year-old kids. One you can manage. Two is impossible. And it's really funny because even though they're littermates, they're just so different in personality and body types. The one I call Godzilla, around the house we call her Angel, and she really is. She's just a gentle, sweet thing, but she is as big as a moose. And so she's the big, lumbering, on-the-ground monster. And then we have Shadow, who is Rodan, and if you remember in the Japanese movies, Rodan was the flying monster. Shadow literally flies. She has a 5'9" vertical leap. And this is a cat that is 40 inches long from tip of nose to tail, so over 3 feet long. And when these two go through the house, it is total destruction. And so that's how they got the names Godzilla and Rodan, because there's if you look at the old Japanese movies, yes, you can easily see how that works with these two.
So do you leave them alone in the house when you're gone?
Oh no, they have free run, which is also a problem. You learn quickly early on what you can leave out and what you can't. For example, I was working on something the other day, and I had a right angle elbow connector laying on the desk. Went to reach for it. It was gone. I have caught them dragging hunks of Cat5 cable and coax adapters, servo motors. They tried to grab my laser presentation pointers. Best I can figure is they are building something upstairs. I'm not sure I want to go see what it is, but I think the dog next door may be neutered from 100 yards. But that's really, you have to look at these two that way. They've never chewed or destroyed anything, but they steal things. Last year, I'd gotten some, souvenir pins from HRO, for example, and I knew that I had them. I knew I had packed them. I knew I had unpacked them. I could not find them. And it took me 3 days to find their new hiding place. They had stolen those two pins. When I was doing my second book, I was going to do a project with a pair of chips, and they were the only two chips of that type that I had. And I would set them out the night before and was getting ready to work, got up the next morning, and they were gone. And I actually had to order a set of replacement chips. It took me almost a week to find their hiding place. And they had stuffed them into a file folder.
And closed the file drawer, so you would never find it.
Well, they didn't close the file drawer, but they'd stuffed it in a file folder, and you couldn't tell there was anything in the folder. The front was closed, and so you didn't even think to look in there. And I mean, that's just the way they are. They are very thinking, very intelligent cats, but they're a lot of fun too. It's, like I say, it's like you're trying to keep up with a pair of 3-year-old grandkids.
Now, are you using any technology with them? I mean, have you applied Arduino to cat raising or RFID tags or anything like that?
No, they're actually both microchipped, but no, haven't. I think they've got enough technology on their own with the stuff they do. I really don't want them learning much more. But no, not a whole lot of technology with them. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos where people put a Go Cam on their dog or cat, and these two are house cats. And again, I'm not sure I want to know what they're doing during the day. So,
what excites you the most about what's happening in ham radio now?
The return to homebrewing and building. A lot of people are getting into kits and transitioning from kits into home brewing. Things like the BitX boards give you an easy transition from building your own kits and getting something that works, not having that frustration of trying to find bad solder joints and things. It's, kind of a semi-kit. So it's a good transition, but I'm really happy with the interest. I mean, look at the two Arduino books. They've been popular beyond my wildest imagination. And it's not just the Arduino, it's everything. You look at all the Raspberry Pi stuff, and just everybody's coming out with some kind of new project these days. And it's all, homebrew type stuff and creative stuff, but they're using today's technology. And then there's a lot of people refurbishing some of the older rigs like me, and you'll see it in QST and CQ and some of the other magazines. People are rebuilding some of the older rigs and modernizing them. So I think that the trend towards the home building has been the most satisfying thing to me.
Are you still getting paper magazines?
Yeah, I'm old school.
Uh-huh.
I do everything with pencil and paper. All my notes are done that way, and then I transcribe them. Yeah, I got smartphones and laptops and everything else, but first thing I do is grab a notepad and paper. So I'm still old school. I like the print versions. If there's something special, I will generally go online and download the digital version and then print the pages I'm interested in to use as worksheets.
That's a great idea. Is there are there magazines that you, since you're a person who likes the paper, is there a magazine for following Arduino building or maker building or home brewing that you like?
Yeah, the closest one for the Arduino would be Make magazine, MAKE. They have a lot of homebrew type projects and include a lot of Arduino stuff, but they're more for the general masses. They have an occasional ham radio article or two, but it is the builder mentality. And you also get to see all of the new products. For example, I saw a 3D printer. They do a series on 3D printers, and I'm about to the point that I'm going to have to get me one of those to play with.
You don't limit yourself to only ham radio Arduino projects, do you?
No, it's kind of whatever hits me at the moment. Our ham radio club has done a lot of work with one of the local libraries, and we come up with some Arduino projects, and every summer or two we do a couple-day seminar and teach the kids the Arduino and have them build their own little Arduino project they can take home and play with. So it's kind of whatever hits me at the moment as I'm walking by kind of deal.
Glenn, what is in your future in terms of what projects do you have brewing, either in new books or new publications?
Well, at Dayton, hopefully I'm going to meet with Steve Ford at ARRL, who's their publications director, and kick around some new project ideas. Of course, one is an update to the high-speed multimedia, the Mesh book, and another one be a third Arduino book. And my thinking for the third Arduino book, since the first book was kind of an introductory to the Arduino, and the second one was let's take it as far as we can take it, I want to go back, and the third book would be kind of a middle-of-the-road, intermediate, but again, practical products. So that's kind of where I'm looking. I don't have enough ideas yet for a book. There's all sorts of new things out there. Of course, the BitX stuff. These days, mag loop antennas seem to be one of the hot things.
Right, so you could build an Arduino mag loop antenna tuner.
Right.
Right. The biggest problem with a magnetic loop antenna is that it has such a high Q, right, that if you move the frequency of your dial slightly, you have to retune the antenna.
Exactly. And I mean, it's such a sensitive tuning that, an Arduino doing that would probably be a lot better because, it doesn't have the shaky fingers that we do. So that's just, some of the things I'm looking at. Another one that I've been kicking around, and this one's almost going to hit the lab soon. You're familiar, satellites seem to be one of the popular things these days.
Right.
The F satellites that you can hit with the HTs. And everybody's using those handheld arrow antennas. But you've got no real way of knowing if you're pointing at the satellite or not. So why not put something at the base of one of those handheld antennas that would give you the satellite tracking information and tell you that you need to move your antenna right or left or up or down. And so you can actually know when you're pointing at the satellite rather than taking a best guess.
So you're saying that, in fact, what you could do is create like a pole-mounted antenna controller that knows where the satellite is based on whatever satellite it is you're trying to follow.
Right. My working concept on that is something like a little box with a magnetometer in it, so I get the compass directions, and then they make them now in 9 degrees of freedom, and they're little accelerometers, so you know what angle and everything that everything's pointing at. And you'd have a little color TFT display that would be almost like a target system, so you could see where in relation to the target you are and should be. And then that would talk back to like a PC running Ham Radio Deluxe or Sat PC 32 and communicate via Bluetooth, so it could feed the satellite position information to your handheld unit wirelessly.
Well, I think that that's the beauty of because I'm seeing this, as I say, in some of the commercial projects that I'm looking at now, and that is that you can buy these Arduinos with built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth for under $10 easily. So
Yes.
What I think is cool when you brought up the idea of both this controller as well as control a magnetic loop antenna is that you wouldn't have to have a control line out to that antenna or to the rotor. You could actually use an RF link, like a Bluetooth RF link, to control the tuning of the magnetic loop antenna or the positioning of that antenna.
Right. And actually, when you look at the magnetic loop antenna theory, and I'm no expert on it, but the number one and two things they talk about is you need distance. The mag loop needs to be out in an open area above ground.
And away from the operator if you're running any power at all.
Exactly. So do you want to run your coax and some kind of control cable, or do you want to just run one length of coax and control everything wirelessly?
And maybe power it over the coax cable, but maybe not, right?
Well, you could make it a battery-powered unit. I mean, the current draw is so small, you could power it with a little lithium-ion battery. But I'm a battery person. I like to keep things isolated and separate. So, I mean, if I were to do it, I would have a rechargeable battery pack that would be at the base, because you got to drive motors and stuff anyway.
Right. No, it's cool. It's a very cool idea, and certainly it fits with the Arduino. What advice would you give to newer returning hams, and has that advice, do you think, changed over the years?
No, not really. In fact, it's become emphasized really with the current trends in the home building and everything. And that's, learn the basics. Don't just grab a radio and get on the air and start making contacts, although that's a lot of fun. Like I say, I'm looking forward to participating in the ARRL grid chase this year. That just looks like a lot of fun, and the FT8 mode looks to be a lot of fun. But my advice would be to learn the fundamentals, play, experiment, tinker, and always ask questions. The only question that's dumb is the one you don't ask. And if you approach it with that inquisitive mindset and try to learn the fundamentals and learn what's happening when you key the mic and learn how to make what is your best place to make your signal better? Is it in your antenna? Is it in your coax? Is it in your power? Learn some of the fundamentals and, maybe try some home brewing, because that helps you learn how things work. And I think once you understand how thing works, it makes the hobby more fun. At least it does to me.
Glenn, I'm so grateful that you agreed to come back on the QSO Today podcast. I've been thinking about Arduinos and KW5GP for the last couple of years, so I'm so glad that you were able to make the time to speak to me, actually before you have a big cat show weekend. So I got you at just the right time, and I appreciate so much that you came on, and I want to wish you 73.
Well, Eric, it has been a blast. We had a blast last time, and I always enjoy doing this. The Monsters are going over to Alabama for a show this weekend, and then it's back into ham activities. We got the Mississippi QSO Party, which is one of my favorite contests, in a couple weeks, and then again the Memphis Ham Fest, and of course Dayton. And by all indications, I will be at Dayton, so please look me up. Sorry we missed last year, but anybody that hears this, I'd love to see you there. Just grab me. I'm there to have fun and love to talk with you. And I'm looking forward to Dayton, and hopefully it'll be as much fun this year as it was last year, except without the mud.
73, Glenn. That concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope that you enjoyed this QSO with Glenn. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put in KW5GP in the search box at the top of the page. Now you're going to find a couple of episodes that come up. So this is episode 189. Glenn was also in episode 49. My thanks to both SodaBeams and QRP Labs for their support of the QSO Today podcast. Please show your support of these fine sponsors by clicking on their links in the show notes pages or by using QSO Today as one word in the coupon box at checkout. You may notice that some of the episodes are transcribed into written text. If you'd like to sponsor this or any of the episodes into written text, please contact me. Support the QSO Today podcast by first joining the QSO Today email list by pressing the subscribe buttons on the show notes page. I will not spam you or share your email address with anyone. Become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor buttons on the show notes pages. I'm grateful for any way that you show appreciation and support. It makes a big difference. QSO Today is now available in iHeartRadio and iTunes Store and now a host of podcast services and applications. Stitcher is still my favorite. I say this every week. Until next time, this is Eric for Z1UG 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.